Thank you for welcoming into your place of worship and communion. Today I'm asking you to go on a journey with me through torturous American history, from European land sighting to this present dire moment. Through this journey, I am asking the questions: what does it mean to be a people of God in this time? What do we do in an apocalyptic moment? What do we do with the Bible and texts like we just read, Revelation 21, texts that describe the end of the world, when the world we know seems to be ending? Let's begin. In October of 1492, on his first voyage across the Atlantic, Christopher Columbus saw the waters of the Caribbean. He wrote in his journal that the water met the sky like it reached the heavens, as if he were at the highest point on earth, closest to the celestial realm. The light on the water was like diamonds, sparkling like crystals, with multifaceted points of light. Columbus's landing on the shores of Guanahani, now San Salvador, was part of an apocalyptic dream, full of end-time hopes and visions of Christ's millennial reign on earth. Columbus read Revelation chapter 21, just as you and I have. He longed for the day the shining city of the New Jerusalem would descend from the heavens, and his apocalyptic ego reassured him that he would be the man to make that happen. If I find a route to the east, he hypothesized, I can take treasures to fund a final crusade on Jerusalem, taking back the city for Christendom, and then Christ will return. I will find paradise in the utter east. Though dead wrong in his geography, Columbus raided and killed in the Caribbean, still in a bloody, fevered apocalyptic dream. And the New World appeared on the horizon of European imagination, full of end-time predictions and timelines. The Old World looked to the New World and populated it with all its hopes and dreams, whether evangelistic or mercantile, or both, murderous or full of longing, or both. And onto the New World could be projected all sorts of visions without regard to its peoples, creatures, and habitats. For the European Christian imagination, the New World was like the New Jerusalem of Revelation 21, come down from heaven. And so in the 17th century, 150 years later, when the Puritans settled into colonies up and down America's East Coast, they also saw themselves as establishing the New Jerusalem. Many of them were religious refugees, and they saw in this new land a place where God's kingdom could truly be established. As for the indigenous peoples in the land already, well, they could be evangelized, which would help fulfill the prophecy that every tongue and nation would worship the Lord. And if they would not convert and would not comply, well, their murder was justified in God's heavenly plan. If the kingdom was to be established, then there would have to be losses, just as the Israelites slaughtered the Canaanites in the Bible according to God's command. So also, they believed, colonizers had the divine right to clear the land. In 1607, colonist Daniel Denton in New York saw indigenous populations decimated, and he wrote, "Where the English come to settle, a divine hand makes way for them by removing or cutting off the Indians, either by wars one with the other or by some raging mortal disease." And so, American history marches down through the years hand in hand with the Bible, and especially with the book of Revelation. The vision of God's golden shining city and its establishment at any cost can be so politically handy so that it can be used even for war and bloodshed and environmental devastation. The verses and images of the book of Revelation, of the Archangel Michael leading the heavenly host in battle, or of the bowls of God's wrath being poured out on the earth, or even of the golden walls of the New Jerusalem, These can serve as a rallying cry in wartime, a justification for violence, and a gate and a wall for keeping those unwanted out of the nation. So what happens when a nation understands itself to be God's city and equates the United States with the shining city on a hill? Does it astound the rest of the world with its unprecedented righteousness? Convince and convert the rest of the world to its way of life? Give freely of its infinite plenitude? In whatever ways America has tried to do any of these things, at the same time, its certainty about being exceptional, its security in being God's chosen, has fed its self-justification to exploit, extract, enslave, and exclude. The United States has, through its nearly 250 years, identified as the shining city on a hill, as God's country, as the New Jerusalem. And yet, enslaved Africans built its golden streets. Latine peoples harvested the fruit along the river of life. Asian immigrants laundered the pure white robes of the saints. And crowds of rejected refugees through the decades, Irish, Jewish, Syrian, Iraqi, Haitian, stood and stand outside the walls of the New Jerusalem. Revelation 21, the vision of the shining New Jerusalem, can be a vision of comfort, and it is for many, perhaps for you. But apocalyptic visions can change shape to be used for many purposes. You may read these verses to take comfort in a place of heavenly refuge, close to God, and you may see the nations entering the city as the promise of inclusion, a promise that everyone belongs, that anyone can enter. But the powerful, officials, leaders, politicians of American history have also focused on Revelation 21, verse 27, but nothing unclean will enter it, nor anyone who practices abomination or falsehood, but only those who are written in the Lamb's book of life. This is the rhetoric of exclusion, and it has easily been taken to justify all sorts of exclusion from this nation. Because, as the logic goes, if the United States is the New Jerusalem, then God's enemies must be kept out. And the leaders of the land are all too happy to determine for themselves who these enemies are. Who are the unclean? Historic records will show that Americans can label anyone unclean. They can be Caribbean freed persons accused of bringing yellow fever, the Irish refugee said to be prone to cholera, the Chinese immigrant accused of spreading leprosy and smallpox, the Mexican day laborer feared to be bringing typhoid, the Asian communities said to be contaminated with COVID, especially nicknamed Kung Flu in racist language. Whoever is unwanted can be called unclean. The same is true for identifying those who practice abomination and speak falsehood. Politicians and officials will borrow the rhetoric of exclusion from that verse and also from the next chapter, from Revelation 22:15, which reads, "Outside the walls are the dogs and sorcerers and sexually immoral and murderers and idolaters." This vocabulary should sound familiar to you. How often have we heard immigrants and refugees described in the last 10 more years as animals, as rats, that they do the abominable and even eat the abominable? How often have we heard migrants described as rapists and murderers? How often have we heard that Muslims do not belong in this country because they are not of our religion, and so we need a Muslim ban? And as for determining whose name is written in the Lamb's book of life, our immigration policies have made documentation the only way to be identified as a human being, deserving human rights. And just like in Revelation, where one's name can be blotted out from the Lamb's book of life, in America, names can be erased, documents made meaningless, citizenships overruled, especially under our current administration. It is not a coincidence that we find Revelation's language in today's politics. This is a result of hundreds of years of identifying as God's exceptional nation and the New Jerusalem. It is also a sign in recent times of the surge of Christian nationalism and Christian dominionism and re-emboldened white supremacy. For the last 10 years, far-right leaders have campaigned on building the wall on the US-Mexico border, to build it bigger and stronger and longer than ever. The language of Revelation 21 was used directly to argue for the wall. Right-wing minister Robert Jeffress stated, "Even heaven has a wall around it. Not everybody is going to get in." And today you can buy bumper stickers that say, "Heaven has a wall around it, hell has open borders." Those advocating for a wall around the US have envisioned heaven as a place of exclusion, a land made for defense and guard and not for welcome, a shining city with a radiance not for the glory of God, but for the beaming light of surveillance and hunting of humans. So what do we do with this long history, with these unholy connections between national violence and biblical apocalypse? And what do we do now, especially now, when we are living during what seems to be an apocalypse? Apocalypse in its ancient Greek meaning, as you probably know, is literally revelation, an unveiling. Today we see the revealing of national hatred, long-held xenophobia, decades of white grievance. We see the unveiling of the worst instincts for recrimination and vitriol, mob violence and anarchy. And we see apocalypse in the modern and popular sense of the term as catastrophe and world-changing disaster. We see humans caged and gloated over, children's lives cut off. We watch fires and floods and storms decimate neighborhoods. We see disease claim millions of lives. We hear of war and rumors of war. We see the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in the air, and too often it gives horrible, damning proof that the US flag is still there, signaling international arms trades, broken agreements, political corruption, and greed. If we say we are a people of God, what do we do in an apocalypse? Does the book of Revelation give us any answers? Do we claim ourselves as God's people and then take refuge within the walls of the city while others lurk outside? Do we look from afar like the kings of the earth in Revelation chapter 18 as the great woman Babylon burns to the ground? Do we mourn her fall, but only from a safe distance, grieving because we lost wealth and goods and ways to enrich ourselves? Do we make careful calculations to predict whether we are safe or not, and for how long? Historian Jason Staley has said, "You know you're living in a fascist society when you're constantly going over in your head the reasons why you're safe." Some of us here today, whether in person or live streaming, are not safe, have not been safe. And there are those who might say, "Well, we'll be okay. America always rights itself. They won't let things go too far." But I say, it is a privilege to deny an apocalypse, to have the safety to say, "I don't see it because I don't feel it. It's not really all that bad. You are having paranoid visions." We are living in an apocalypse, and I don't have all the answers for what we do in this apocalypse of ours. But I say this apocalypse of ours as part of the answer, because we are living in but one of many disastrous times that have unfolded over human history. That may seem like pretty cold comfort, but the histories of trauma and suffering and grief over the millennia can be histories of survival and persistence. For some in America, their family histories in the land are a record of a string of apocalypses, from capture and kidnapping in Africa to the Middle Passage, to long and brutal enslavement, through lynchings, mobs, and segregation, sundown towns, Jim Crow, and police brutality. And yet, when we look through these phases of American history, each of them containing world-ending calamities, we find inextinguishable hope and endurance, and even joy. I was recently at an academic workshop where New Testament scholar Dr. Lisa Bowens presented the testimony of two African-American women, both from the 19th century. One was Julia Foote, born to formerly enslaved parents. The other was an unnamed woman, formerly enslaved herself. Both recorded visions they had that were like ancient apocalypses, revelations of an otherworldly realm with angelic guides. Julia Foote writes in her autobiography that in her vision, Christ bathed her with water, with a congregation of people standing by, and she says, "When the washing ended, the sweetest music I had ever heard greeted my ears. We walked to the shore, where an angel stood with a clean white robe, which the Father at once put on me. In an instant, I appeared to be changed into an angel." She writes that after eating with the people, Christ gave her a mission to go out as God's ambassador. And she and all the people walked together, she writes, singing and shouting. They embraced me, and I found myself once more on earth. The unnamed woman in her vision is also transformed, dressed in snow-white robes with a golden crown on her head. She describes a city that will seem familiar to us. She writes, "I saw a beautiful city, the length and breadth of which I couldn't tell. There was no sun, but it was bright as day when the sun is in mid-heaven. As I still stood looking about me, I don't know why, but I was not afraid. A cup was handed to me, and as it touched my lips, it touched the lips of a host of angels that sat at a long table of which I couldn't see the end. The voice said to me, 'This is love and union.'" Both of these women see another divine realm unveiled. They know themselves to be transformed and chosen, dressed in white robes. They know this deeply, despite their history of suffering in an earthly realm that rejects them. Their visions of God's realm overlap with the book of Revelation, but their vision and interpretation of Apocalypse is one of joy, communion, and courage. The unnamed woman enters a city with, yes, walls and gates, but the vision is transformed with an endless table and the sharing of the cup. The message she receives does not command destruction and exclusion, but love and union. Julia Foote's vision empowers her to go and preach, even though she had been afraid her community might reject her. Her interpretation of her apocalypse enabled her to travel and to preach, at risk to herself, a Black woman. She urged her hearers to denounce the evils of American racism and lynching, and she urged women to resist patriarchy. "Sisters," she preached, "shall not you and I unite with the heavenly host in the grand chorus? If so, you will not let what man may say or do keep you from doing the will of the Lord or using the gifts you have for the good of others." These women, enduring times of disaster, understood the apocalypse of God as a re-visioning of themselves, of revealing how they were protected by God's love and what they were capable of. They overcame their fear and went out to empower others. If these women in their time of oppression could embrace a vision of God's transforming power, then we must rise up to the challenge as well. What do we do with a book like Revelation, especially given our nation's history and our current chaos? As history and these women have shown, Revelation is what you do with it. You can reveal inside yourself the utter arrogance, greed, and violence of colonialism and white supremacy. Or you can reveal the power of God to transform you, to stand unafraid for justice, to create love, joy, and union. We live in terrible times, but they are not exceptional, and neither is this country. But what is exceptional is each ancestor, by blood or faith, who comes before us working for peace, justice, and love. These form for us a cloud of witnesses and a host of angels waiting to watch our transformation in this time when we see the revelation of what we are capable of with the love of God and love for each other. May it be so. Amen.